Nurses of Reddit, what were the most haunting things someone said on their deathbed? Not a nurse. Was an EMTB on the 911 unit that got a call about a hit and run. Cops were on scene first. The area of the city I worked in was rough. Some guy and his GF had got into a fight in the parking lot. It ended with the guy running over his GF, then backing up over her. Needless to say, she wasn't doing well, and her vitals were tanking. We loaded her up, with a fireman and police officer joined with us in the back of the rig. She kept mumbling, "Tell my mom. Please tell my mom." And naturally I figured it was her asking us to let her mom know she was hurt. The hospital takes care of that, and I put it out of my mind rather quick as we were working over her. She flatlined before we arrived. They did not get her back. My partner was finishing up her paperwork and we turned to give her wallet back to the staff. The nurse on duty, who I knew pretty well, was reading a dirty piece of paper. She looked disgusted. When I asked what was up, she simply put the piece of paperwork down. It was a letter that was picked up near her purse on scene. She had gotten accepted into a college. I realized then that in the ambulance, she was asking us to tell her mom she got into college. That is a deep sadness I have never forgotten. Edit, fixed an autocorrect word. So this happened a couple of years ago. We had an ex-gang guy who was dying of cancer and he confessed that he was the gang hitman for many years. He wanted to confess to all the killings and show the police where the bodies are buried. He would get closure knowing that the surviving families of his victims find out where they are buried. We had to get the hospital legal team involved cause we had no policies to deal with that. Cops got involved and the dude confessed to gang murders from decades ago. I had to tell my grandmother that dialysis would only give her another week or so to live and it was her choice to try or not. She was in and out of consciousness at that point and was in a clear state for the moment. She asked, "Will I die?" I said, "Yes." She looked me in the eye and smiled just a little and said, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do." She closed her eyes, squeezed my hand and slept until she passed a day later. When things get hard, I always hear her say, "Sometimes you gotta do what you don't want to do." Edit, I did not expect such a response. You've all warmed my heart and made me laugh a few times too. Thank you, and I'm really happy to see my grandma's resolve to go the way of all flesh with dignity has touched so many. Not a nurse, but my grandfather was put into a 24/7 care home with severe Parkinson's. My mom and grandma had spent 4 years basically taking care of him constantly and needed a break for a couple weeks, although visiting him every other day in shifts. I went one day alone and he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I need you to get me home so I can die. I can't do it here." I tried saying everything I could to the nurses and my family to get him home without saying what he told me. 24 hours later he got rushed to emerge. As he was dying he looked at me and said, "Don't let it bother you," and died. Still bothers me. Edit, I really just wanted to get this off my chest and sleep. I didn't anticipate the powerful dialogue, with you all honestly, thank you so much. She looked at me and said, "You really are a little pipsqueak." I was her favorite nurse too. While in hospice my grandma said to me, "There are a great many things in this world worse than dying." Then talked about how lucky she was to have lived the life she did. I had never looked at death like that before and that conversation truly changed me and my outlook. She was the most wonderful person. About 2 minutes before my grandma passed she had clarity. She'd suffered from severe dementia for years. She opened her eyes and said, "I found Jack. My grandpa Woad died 8 years prior." She said they were at a ball with their friends. Then she said, "I've gotta go, he asked me to dance." Then she was gone. My patient grabbed my arm, looked me in the eyes and said, "Please don't let me die, I have a daughter. I'm going home." I worked as a nurse's aide in a nursing home, for just 2 months, brand new. This gentleman was assigned to my caseload the entire time I had worked there, and was on hospice the whole time, but had seemed to be doing well. This night, I was working with him and he seemed off. I talked to him and explained what I was doing to care for him, but he just sounded so angry and confused. I was new to this, so I didn't know quite what to do, so I pressed on. He got so freaked out, he took his oxygen tubing and tried to wrap it around my throat to strangle me. I got away, told the nurse, and was told that confusion and aggression were common when people were dying. He needed his care regardless. I went to care for him again a few hours later, and he looked so docile, so defeated. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at me, and told me, "I'm real sorry for what I did earlier, ma'am, that's not who I am. I'm so sorry. I told him it was okay, and that I just wanted to make him comfortable. He thanked me, and said the line, I'm going home. He just kept repeating it, and sounded so urgent. I'm going home. I'm going home. I'm going home. I thought he was still confused. He passed away 1.5 hours later, right after my shift was over. I was the one to hear his last words. Upon learning that he passed away, I immediately thought of those last words. Sticks with me to this day. This was almost 12 years ago, and I don't think I'll ever forget. My great-uncle's last words before he passed were, "It is what it is." I know it's really common, but I find myself saying it quite a lot nowadays. It is what it is. My great-aunt, who lived to be 101, was straight vegetative for like a month or so before passing, the day after her 101st birthday. On the day of her birthday, she suddenly was conscious and awake as everybody had come to leave a birthday cake. She told stories and laughed. Then she went back to being comatose and died the next day. Woman loved her birthday, lol. Edit went to work and came back to this having exploded, lol. I have been enjoying the conversation begun here though. I'm going to die. I know I'm going to die. He was going for very routine, fairly minor surgery. I held his hand and told him he would be fine. He died shortly after the procedure. I'm not a nurse, but my grandparents passed 3 days apart from each other. My grandmother was diagnosed with lung cancer and began treatment. About halfway through, she sat everyone down and told us she felt her life was so fulfilled and would stop treatment, essentially choosing to pass peacefully. My grandfather was healthy, the type of man who went to the gym until he was 90. Just in impeccable shape and health, honestly. My grandmother was on her deathbed for a long while. In and out of consciousness, no longer communicating often, and only eating ice chips. It really tore my grandfather up, and one day he was at the grocery store and just had a heart attack and passed away within minutes. A few days later, my dad and I were sitting with my grandmother in her room. I was holding her hand and remember my dad telling her my grandfather is waiting for her whenever she is ready and she won't have to go alone. My grandmother spoke her first words in a week and said, "He's right here with me, I see him." My dad said, "What's he wearing?" Which at the time I thought it was an odd question, but she giggled and said, "He's in my favorite grey suit, I think we're going out." She was such a fashionable woman, so they always were so well dressed. She passed that evening. We had their funeral together, and my dad dressed him in the suit she told him my grandfather was wearing. They were so in love. Still to this day I have never seen anyone compare to what they had. A part of me feels my grandfather died of a broken heart, but also knew she needed him onto their next journey. It tears me to pieces every time I think of her last words. I know they're happy and together. I miss them both so much. The world is a little dimmer without them. Many moons ago, when I was a nursing student, a man in his 40s was lying on his deathbed from terminal cancer, his sobbing wife lying in bed next to him. He looked at his wife, using the last bit of energy he had to gently wipe away her tears and stroke her cheek. He took off his oxygen mask and said, "Don't worry, love, don't be afraid. It's just death," and passed shortly after. From when I worked in private practice. Had a patient get diagnosed with a moderately aggressive but treatable throat cancer. We tried everything we could think of to get him to consider treatment. He refused any type of treatment, so after about 3 months, his wife had their 2 adult sons basically carry him into the office at 4:50 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. I was the only nurse in the building. I got him into an exam room. Dude was completely grey, gaunt, and you could hear how close the end was every time he breathed. It wasn't exactly a death rattle, but you just knew his lungs were full of fluid. His sons sit him in a chair and he starts to slide out. The room was too small to put him on the floor and the exam table was too high to lift him up on it. I stood between his legs and held him upright in the chair while I told the sons to go get the doctor, told the wife to call 911. We all knew nothing was going to keep the man alive much longer. He patted the side of my leg, it was the most he could move, and whispered, "I should have listened to you all. I don't want to die." He lost consciousness and all I could do was just keep him from sliding out of the chair until the EMTs got there. After the ambulance got him to the hospital, he lasted about 4 hours. Looked after a guy with end-stage heart failure. He kept having episodes where if he coughed or leaned forward, anything to increase his intrathoracic pressure, he would pass out. He would come back after a few minutes and gradually go from purple back to pink. How long was I out for that time? He was fully mentally fine, sharp, witty, and at peace with what was going to eventually happen to him. Him and me were joking that one of these episodes were going to kill him, as he sipped his tea and we talked rubbish. 5 minutes later it happened again and he didn't come back. He had a DNR order which was sensible. Very eerie to talk to somebody so vibrant and alert minutes before he died. Such a nice dude, I want to be in that mindset when I go too. What is one thing you shouldn't do naked? Take a picture of a reflective tea kettle you are selling on eBay. Anything around a cat. Use a chainsaw. Go down a metal slide on a hot summer day. Frying anything in oil. Jury duty for a sexual assault case. Go to a funeral. Be knighted by the Queen. Weld. Go to school. Paint the neighbor's house. Short stocks. Cook bacon. Stroll through the cacti. Play with kittens. Wear clothes. What's the most NSFW thing you've done at work? Microwaved a grape in the work microwave. For the scientists, cut a grape in half, leaving a small amount connected, creating an 8 pattern. Put it in a microwave, turn on and it creates a plasma, superheated gas. Anyway, to stop it spitting I put some kitchen roll underneath. Unfortunately the superheated gas ignited the paper and we had a small fire. Did I get in trouble? Nope, the whole team was watching, even my boss. Fun times. I mixed degreaser with bleach so mopping the floor could be done in one step. Made chlorine gas. Accidentally made an exploding steam engine out of a water pump. Fell on ice in the parking lot, died. I got better, TBI, coma, critical, recovered. Kind of famous at work as the guy that died. Took a dump in the executive suite's toilet. I worked in a warehouse for a security company. We had quite the collection of contraband confiscated from all the concerts and other events. I would usually rummage through it late at night while working. One time my buddies came to pick me up after work and we hung out throwing knives and other sharp shit at boxes. Another time I tried spraying mace and learned never to do that without eye protection. Even the lightest back spray is fucking brutal. Another time I walked out of the bathroom to see my boss pointing a gun with a laser sight at me as a joke. This same boss tasered one of my colleagues while he was pulling up the warehouse gate. Suffice to say, I'm surprised I survived that job with all the crazy shit that happened there. Ripped my suit pants and walking around the rest of the day with my white underwear exposed. Sit for extended periods of time while staring into a screen. I work at a fetish clothing boutique, frequently adding new products to our web page. My most amusing one is definitely spending the majority of my day censoring penises in sheer underwear. Used to smoke weed on my lunch break and come in so freaking high. I planned to quit soon but noticed on my boss calendar that there was an event called drug test. I quit before then but always wondered if that was meant for me. Took a bunch of Xanax by a little bit accident and sat on the floor for my entire 6-hour shift and then went home and slept for 15 hours straight. I worked in different labs as a phlebotomist, sometimes with a receptionist and sometimes I did everything and held down the lab by myself. My GF came and gave me a BJ during one of the times I was by myself. Granted it was slow, but pretty funny still. If someone came for blood work I'd have to zip up and deal. Edit, slow at the lab, normal paced BJ if I recall. Removed my USB without being told it was safe to do so. My manager got caught fucking the cook in the walk-in and instead of firing the manager they just moved the cook to a different store because there was no evidence, just hearsay. But a week or so later she got caught in the act with another coworker, they both got fired. That's Denny's for you. I work in EMS. For a long term we were excused from the HR meetings about harassment, but because of an incident before I got hired, we all had to go to a sexual harassment training with other regular office government employees. It was pretty cringe because they clearly had no idea what we dealt with. At one point the presenter was describing how we should report whenever someone makes a reference to anything sexual so it can be addressed, to which a medic asked if that included the patients who masturbated in front of us in the back of the ambulance. The presenter's only response was, "Oh my god, does that really happen?" We never had to go to an HR meeting again after that, probably because they were not equipped for the reality of our problems.